In the late 1990s, Jeffrey Epstein was known to many as a financier who appeared suddenly in elite circles. According to public records, his wealth was opaque, his business activities difficult to trace, and his rise unusually rapid. He owned multiple properties, traveled frequently by private aircraft, and maintained relationships with powerful figures across politics, finance, science, and royalty. At the time, few questions were asked publicly about how he accumulated influence so quickly, or why doors seemed to open for him with little resistance. According to records, Epstein was born in 1953 in Brooklyn, New York. He attended college briefly, but did not complete a degree. By the mid-1970s, he was teaching at an elite private school in Manhattan, despite limited formal qualifications. Reports suggest that through connections made during this period, Epstein transitioned into finance. By the 1980s, he was working for Bear Stearns, handling clients whose identities were not widely disclosed. Court documents later indicated that even colleagues struggled to describe the precise nature of his work. After leaving Bear Stearns, Epstein formed his own financial management firm. According to filings, the firm claimed to manage the wealth of clients worth billions, yet publicly known clients were scarce. This gap between claimed activity and visible evidence became a recurring feature of Epstein's story. Financial experts later noted that Epstein appeared to operate outside the normal structures of hedge funds or investment banks, raising questions about how his operations were sustained. By the 1990s, Epstein was embedded in elite social networks. Flight logs, guest lists, and photographs would later document his presence alongside presidents, princes, business leaders, and renowned academics. At the time, these associations were largely viewed as markers of success rather than warning signs. Epstein cultivated an image of exclusivity, presenting himself as a patron of science and education. He donated to research institutions, hosted conferences, and funded projects that connected him to respected figures. Behind this public image, reports suggest a parallel reality. According to later testimony, young women were recruited to Epstein's properties under the guise of massages and introductions to opportunity. Court filings indicate that some of these encounters involved sexual exploitation, often with victims describing patterns of grooming, manipulation, and payment. These allegations would eventually form the core of criminal investigations, but for years they remained fragmented, uncoordinated, and largely unheard. In 2005, complaints from Palm Beach, Florida began to attract law enforcement attention. Local police investigated reports that a minor had been paid for sexual acts at Epstein's mansion. According to police records, detectives interviewed multiple victims who described similar experiences. The resulting report recommended serious charges. What followed, according to later scrutiny, was a sequence of decisions that would become central to questions about power and accountability. Federal prosecutors became involved, and negotiations took place behind closed doors. In 2008, Epstein reached a non-prosecution agreement with federal authorities. According to the agreement, Epstein pleaded guilty in state court to lesser charges, served a limited jail sentence, and registered as a sex offender. The deal also granted immunity to potential co-conspirators, whose names were not publicly disclosed. Victims later stated they were not informed of the agreement at the time. According to legal experts, the arrangement was highly unusual. The scope of immunity, the secrecy surrounding the negotiations, and the leniency of the sentence stood out even then. Epstein was allowed to leave jail for most of the day on work release. Reports suggest that during this period, his social life and travel resumed with relatively little interruption. For many observers, the case faded from public view. For nearly a decade, Epstein maintained a low public profile while continuing to move within elite circles. According to flight records and property logs, he traveled internationally and hosted guests at residences in New York, Florida, New Mexico, Paris, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. His private island, Little St. James, became the subject of later scrutiny, described in court documents as a location where abuse allegedly occurred away from oversight. In 2015 and 2016, investigative journalism revived interest in Epstein's past. Reports began to examine the 2008 agreement in detail, questioning why such a deal had been approved and who had benefited from its secrecy. Journalists uncovered internal correspondence suggesting that federal prosecutors had kept the agreement hidden from victims, potentially violating their rights under federal law. These revelations shifted the narrative from an isolated crime to a systemic failure. In 2018, a Miami Herald investigation brought renewed attention to the victims' stories. According to the reporting, dozens of women described similar patterns of exploitation, many stating that their complaints had been dismissed or minimized. The series emphasized not only Epstein's actions, but also the institutions that had failed to stop him. Public reaction was swift, and calls for accountability intensified. In July 2019, Epstein was arrested by federal authorities on charges of sex trafficking minors. The indictment described a pattern of abuse spanning years and multiple locations. This time, Epstein was denied bail and held in a federal detention center in New York. According to prosecutors, the case would expose a network of enablers and examine how Epstein had operated with apparent impunity for so long. As Epstein awaited trial, attention turned to his connections. Flight logs, address books, and photographs were scrutinized for clues. Reports suggested that Epstein had cultivated relationships not only for social status, but also for protection. Former associates described him as someone who collected secrets, understood leverage, and used proximity to power strategically. These accounts, while not proven as criminal conspiracies, added to the atmosphere of suspicion. On August 10, 2019, Epstein was found dead in his jail cell. Authorities ruled the death a suicide. According to official reports, Epstein had taken his own life while awaiting trial. Almost immediately, questions emerged. Reports indicated that cameras near his cell were malfunctioning and that guards had failed to conduct required checks. The circumstances fueled widespread skepticism and speculation. For many, Epstein's death marked another turning point. With the primary defendant gone, a trial that might have produced sworn testimony and cross-examination would never occur. According to victims' advocates, this outcome represented a profound loss of truth and closure. The absence of courtroom proceedings meant that many questions would remain unanswered. Subsequent investigations examined the failures within the detention facility. The Department of Justice acknowledged lapses in protocol, and charges were later brought against corrections officers for falsifying records, though these cases had limited outcomes. Official reviews concluded that systemic issues, including understaffing and negligence, contributed to the circumstances of Epstein's death. Yet for critics, these explanations did not fully address broader concerns. Attention shifted to civil litigation. Victims pursued lawsuits against Epstein's estate and against individuals accused of facilitating abuse. In 2020, Epstein's estate agreed to a settlement fund for victims, distributing millions of dollars. While this provided some measure of compensation, it did not answer questions about accountability beyond Epstein himself. One figure who drew particular attention was Ghislaine Maxwell, a longtime associate of Epstein. According to court records, Maxwell was accused of recruiting and grooming minors for Epstein. She was arrested in 2020 and later convicted on multiple counts related to sex trafficking. Her trial revealed details about Epstein's operations, but it also highlighted limitations. Many names surfaced only indirectly, and prosecutors emphasized that the case focused on Maxwell's actions, not a broader network. Documents unsealed in related civil cases offered further glimpses into Epstein's world. These records included depositions, emails, and testimony referencing prominent individuals. In many instances, the documents stopped short of alleging criminal conduct, instead illustrating proximity and association. The release of these materials intensified public debate about the difference between social contact and complicity. According to legal analysts, the Epstein case illustrates how power can shape outcomes. Wealth enabled access to top legal representation. Social connections provided credibility and insulation. Institutions, from schools to prosecutors' offices, appeared hesitant to challenge someone so well connected. This combination, critics argue, created an environment where abuse could continue unchecked. International aspects of the case added complexity. Epstein's travels spanned continents, and allegations involved victims from different countries. Jurisdictional challenges and diplomatic sensitivities limited the scope of investigations. According to records, some potential inquiries stalled due to lack of cooperation or expired statutes of limitations. The role of media has been both praised and criticized. Investigative reporting brought victims' stories to light and exposed failures. At the same time, sensationalism and speculation sometimes blurred facts with rumor. The tension between public curiosity and responsible reporting became evident as theories proliferated online, often outpacing verified information. In the years since Epstein's death, official reviews have acknowledged mistakes but stopped short of systemic reform. Some prosecutors involved in the 2008 agreement faced professional scrutiny, yet consequences were limited. Victims' advocates argue that without transparency and accountability, similar cases will recur. The Epstein Files, as they have come to be known, represent more than a collection of documents. They reflect a pattern of silence, influence, and delayed justice. Each record offers fragments rather than a complete picture. According to observers, the truth lies somewhere between what is known and what remains concealed. As time passes, memories fade and evidence becomes harder to trace. Yet the questions endure. How did one individual operate for so long without meaningful intervention? Who benefited from his silence? What mechanisms allowed institutions to look away? According to records, these questions remain officially unanswered. The story does not conclude with a single verdict or document release. It continues through ongoing civil cases, investigative efforts, and the testimonies of those who survived. For them, the search for truth extends beyond headlines and official statements. It is a reminder that justice delayed can become justice denied. Beyond the official story, the Epstein case stands as a study in power and vulnerability. It reveals how systems designed to protect can fail, and how secrecy can thrive in the shadow of influence. According to reports, the full extent of what occurred may never be known. What remains are the files, the records, and the enduring demand for answers that have yet to come.